Okay, Gabe Montemayor is a native of the Austin area and began caving when he was 12 with the UT Grotto. He took a hiatus from caving to pursue a degree in music performance, but even though he was taken out of caves, caves weren't taken out of him. When not in school, Gabe worked at Interspace Caverns and would occasionally be involved in the UT Grotto. Since graduating, Gabe was able to get a permanent job with the National Park Service at his dream park, Carlsbad Caverns. When he isn't working, Gabe enjoys hiking and caving in the Guadalupe Mountains and working with Interspace Caverns to ensure high-quality interpretation of a Texas gem. Please welcome Gabe.
Hey folks, how are y'all doing? Can all y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Alright, I'm like 5'6", I weigh 130 pounds. I don't usually talk very loud unless I'm underground or I'm talking to other cavers. Before I get rolling on everything, let me just go on ahead and actually pull up my presentation.
Sorry,
it's okay, don't worry about it.
Oh no.
It's in there somewhere.
Oh no.
There we go.
I'm new, guys.
Yeah.
Don't judge me.
And just put
Where's the?
very top. There you go, perfect.
There's this, but I didn't turn it on.
No, you should. There's like about a second and a half delay after you push the button.
And it's this one right here?
Yeah, and that is a laser pointer.
Sweet. I like
To make it advance, you have to point it at the projector.
I see. All right, so hi there. My name's Gabe Montemayor. Like Ethan had mentioned earlier, I've been caving since I was about 12 years old. I got my start with the UT Grotto. The first person I ever went caving with was Heather Tushek. I went to Whirlpool Cave, and ever since then I've been kind of in and out with the UT Grotto. I've always wanted to be involved. It's just there always seems to be something that gets in the way. I would say life happens a lot. But anyways, I'm going to be talking about some of my experience working with Interspace, but mostly about my experience with my new job working at Carlsbad Caverns National Park as a park ranger. And I would say for me, this is a total dream job. I've wanted to do this since I was a kid, and also Interspace Caverns has been a really great dream job. I got to work with Meredith over there, and I've had a lot of fun, so let's just dive right into it. So what I'm going to be talking about is some of the responsibilities and the perks that go along with working at one of America's greatest show caves, and also one of the most visited show caves. After working at Interspace for a while, I realized, there's a lot of people that come through here. After working in Carlsbad for a while, I was like, whoa, there is a lot of people that go here. And you would be surprised how many people show up at Carlsbad Caverns, and they have no idea what it is, or like where they are. I've had people get mad at me before. They're like, I don't understand. It's just a sign out in the desert. What gives? Well, you gotta go into the cave to see what it's about. So let's hop right in. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll get into the cave. Is that okay with y'all?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So as a kid, I was fascinated with caves. I literally would not shut up about them. I would read books. I would watch documentaries. This is before like YouTube was out, so I'd go to the library and spend a lot of time reading about caves, getting DVDs about caves, doing whatever. And I'd also beg my parents to take me to the local show caves. My very first cave I ever went to was Interspace Caverns, and I kind of have like a vivid nightmare of that cave. That was my first experience with it, but I still go back for some reason. And even as a kid, I'd always wanted to be a tour guide, either at Natural Bridge Caverns or Cave Without a Name or Interspace Caverns. I figured if my parents could take me to these places, surely I could just work there, right? Wrong. That's not how things work. Also, I live in Elgin, Texas, so even whenever I'm like in town, very rarely am I able to make it out here because I'm either in Georgetown or I'm anywhere but downtown or South Austin except when I'm caving. So anyways, the first time I really... Yes, sir?
Was your mom a caver?
No, she wasn't.
So you weren't infected in the womb?
No, I wasn't. Not this time. So whenever I first fell in love with caves was whenever I went to Carlsbad Caverns at around, I guess, 12 years old or 13 years old. It was the only vacation my parents had ever taken me on. And to this day, is still the only vacation my parents have ever taken me on. Now, they go to Disney all the time. They just do their thing. They're like, whatever. We care less about you. They love me, though, I think. So I went there as a kid, and after being fascinated with caves, I went from being like, yeah, caves are cool, to just being obsessed. I like to tell people at Carlsbad that my parents broke me. at Carlsbad Caverns. All I wanted to do after I left that cave was work at Carlsbad Caverns and to be a park ranger. I think park rangers are super important at all of our national monuments, all of our national parks, because they're the thing that reaches out to people. The way I see it is that if you do good interpretation at like a place like Interspace Caverns, or good interpretation at Jewel Cave, Wind Cave, Mammoth Cave, Carlsbad Caverns, whatever, the better job you do, the more healthy the caving community is going to be. And we don't want people to just go out and ruin caves or go caving and get hurt. We want people to join a community. We want them to do it correctly, I suppose. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I also know that there's a lot of really famous cavers that did not have a start that way. But for me, it's very important to actually reach out to the community, reach out to people, and tell people what the caving community is all about. Being inclusive and getting you underground. So, like I said, the first time I ever went caving was like 2 weeks after I left Carlsbad Caverns. I went with Heather Tuchek to Whirlpool Cave. And from then on, I was really hooked on caving. And I was trying to go to as much caving as I could, but being like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I didn't really fit in with the grotto crowd. I also didn't drive. And I went to school in Taylor, Texas, and living in Elgin, that made life not so easy. So, as it was mentioned in my bio, I totally fell off the caving community map for a long time. I went to school for music because I had no idea I could actually go to school for geology or hydrogeology. I didn't know I could study caves in school. So I just totally wrote it off, and I went to school in New Orleans, of all places, where there's not a lot of caves, and it was fine. I also did a lot of other worthwhile life-stealing activities. I've traveled around the nation about 7 times in a competitive marching band. Yay band. Did that for 7 years, and then I finally got done with it, and I was able to get a job at Interspace Caverns. It kind of happened by mistake. I went on, during like my spring break, I took a tour. I was like, it'd be really cool if I worked here. So I applied, and about a week later, they called me, like the day I was supposed to go back to New Orleans, and like, hey, you want a job? I was like, yes. So I got the job, and I waited like 4 months to come back. And ever since then, I've basically been working during the summers at Interspace Caverns. I went from not really knowing a whole lot about caves to basically being underground every day and loving it. Really, talking to people about caves is what I love to do most, other than hit things and teach kids how to hit things. And but besides caving, my background is in music performance, but it's also in music education. So I've spent a lot of time in classrooms working with middle school kids, high school kids, and even college students at times. So anyways, and also, memes. People made memes about me whenever I left Interspace. It was a fun time. Almost there. So finally I graduated, thank God. I came back home and I started working for Interspace and being a teacher full-time. I was teaching full-time for about a year, but I was also simultaneously going insane teaching kids and making the same commute every day and every day back, and basically spending my time in lit rooms with no windows. Not very fun. Great money, but I wanted to be underground. And so I was spending a lot of my time moonlighting at Interspace Caverns whenever I could. Anyways, just kind of as flights of fancy, I spent a lot of time on usajobs.gov. Every national park or cave that I went to, every park ranger that I met, I'd always ask, how do I get your job? What do I do? They say, well, your first step is you want to go on usajobs.gov and just look for jobs. These things pop up, they go away. If you see it, apply. And don't look back. And so one day I was in the bathroom and I saw what I wanted. I saw the Carlsbad Caverns park ranger position. And I freaked out while on the toilet, and I sent my resume right then. So let's see, January, March. I applied for that job in March. I didn't find out that I had gotten it until May. I didn't find out that I was going to start working there until July 25th, and I found out that my first day of work was on August 5th. So suddenly I got my life together in like 10 days, drove out to New Mexico, and basically started a whole new life and a whole new dream career. So any of y'all ever been actually interested in working for the federal government or maybe being a park ranger? Okay, So I'm gonna tell you what I know about how to get one of these jobs if you're interested in it. So first things first, if you're writing like a federal resume, you want to be as descriptive as possible with everything that you're doing. So let's say that your job includes climbing a ladder like 5 times a day. It's 10 feet. You would want to say, successfully climbed a ladder 5 times a day for 10 feet, up and down, and do that for everything that you do. Now, working in Interspace, I'd say I gave about 5 tours a day independently to groups of up to 30 people. I can stand on my feet for 8 hours. I'm a caver with the grotto, yada, yada. And somehow, that worked for me. Just be as descriptive as possible. Any kind of background can also be used for federal work. A lot of those job applications would say you should have some kind of degree in geology, hydrogeology, environmental sciences and studies. My degree is in music performance. I literally went to school to learn how to hit things. And somehow, it's worked out for me. So I also have an education background, like I had mentioned. So this worked out nicely for actually being put in front of people, being put in front of middle school kids, high school kids, and the general public. Also, giving tours in Interspace didn't hurt. Also, you want to be patient, because this can take a long time. I was literally waiting for months on end on the edge of my seat every day, like, am I going to get called? There's no way. They didn't hire me. Oh my God, I got hired. And that all happened over like a long time. Positions are very competitive. I was only one of 2 new hires in the most recent hiring process out of 50 people. They were park rangers, they were veterans, they were visitor use assistants, people that collect fees for the federal government. So I am very lucky. I probably shouldn't have got this job. But again, I'm super happy that I have it, super humbled, super honored, and just very lucky, I would say. I'm also the only employee at that park that has no federal experience prior, which I think is kind of odd. Everyone that I know has worked at other parks or that park for 4 or 5 years or moved around. And that's kind of the lifestyle of park rangers. They get to a job and they'll move. And very few people actually stay at Carlsbad Caverns. And oddly enough, very few park rangers at Carlsbad Caverns are actually cavers. They're there because it was their first permanent job. I'm one of the few cavers that's always like, hey, let's go caving. And other people are like, why do you want to do that? And this kind of goes without saying, whether you're in the music world, whether you're in the caving world, anything, network with everyone. The more people you know, the easier your life is going to be. I had a lot of references from park rangers that I had met going to these other parks, and instructors that I had met at Western Kentucky University when I was able to take some courses out there, thanks to kind of weird elective credits when I was in college. Okay, so now to the fun stuff. What do I actually do at the park? So I'm going to kind of go over each section and then elaborate. Or if you want me to do it differently, let me know. So my responsibilities include leading and trailing on all of the tours. If you have your show caves in Texas, you have like your adventure tour where you get to walk around the cave, and then you have your kind of flashlight tour, then you have your wild cave tour, quote unquote wild, right? At this cave, we have about 7 different tours, and they range from very easy to pretty difficult. Now, if you're working there every day, if you're a caver, if you're a hiker, no sweat. First thing is our King's Palace tour. That's our quote-unquote adventure tour. That's where we can take everyone. We usually have about 40 or so people that go on this tour. It lasts about an hour and a half. We go through the more decorated parts of Carlsbad Caverns. Carlsbad Caverns, if you don't know, was first explored by Jim White in around 1898. The whole area had been inhabited by Mescalero Apaches and other people for about 13,000 years. People have known about those caves, and as far as we know, there's 133 caves in Carlsbad Caverns National Park, all 46,000 acres of it. There's also about 1,000 caves in Lincoln National Forest. So if you want to go caving, the Guads and the Lincoln National Forest is a great place to do it. Sorry, I totally went off on a tangent. So King's Palace is our regular standard guided tour. It's lit, it's paved, it's easy to get around. We also have our left-hand tunnel tour, and it's a little off-trail thing on a clearly marked trail, but there's no lights. We carry around lanterns. It's more intimate experience with the cave. I enjoy it. A lot of people enjoy it. And for a lot of older folks who have never been into a cave, it's their first experience with caving or being inside of a cave without commercially lit lights or commercially paved trails. After that, we have the lower cave tour, which is our caving 101. In order to get down into lower cave, you have to go down about 12 or so feet of hand line, down flowstone, and then to 70 feet of ladders to get to the floor of lower cave. After that, it's just an advanced hike. You're walking through a cave, you're walking on trail, and you get to see some really awesome stuff, like one of the largest collections of cave pearls in that part, one of the largest rooms from the bottom. Looking up into the big room is really awesome, and you also get to see signatures from Jim White, the original explorer, whenever he was making his way down in, say, 1906 to that particular area. After that, we have our more advanced 101. It's Slaughter Canyon Cave. Slaughter Canyon Cave was also known as New Cave at the time. It wasn't discovered until about the 1930s. Again, it was like Interspace. It was found by accident. This guy named Tom Tucker was herding sheep, and his sheep disappeared during a blizzard. He had no idea where they went. He went back home, came out a couple of days later to look for them, and he found them inside of Slaughter Canyon Cave. For a long time, it was believed that Slaughter Canyon Cave was actually going to be larger than Carlsbad, which this is not the case. Carlsbad Caverns is roughly 35 miles in survey. Slaughter Canyon's more like 2 miles of survey. However, the formations that you see in Slaughter Canyon are absolutely incredible. It has the second largest column in the park at around 89 feet. The very last picture that I have is of me standing in front of it being a huge nerd. And then we start getting into our quote-unquote wild cave tours. There's Hall of the White Giant, which will take you to where that is in the picture. That's me on the left side. And that's also on the very start of the trail to get out to the Guadalupe Rim. So if you're keeping track of Derek Bristol's videos, that's how you would get there. You would just keep on going. A lot of his work is still being done there, along with resurveys of Liberty Dome, whenever he's in the park. And then there's Spider Cave, which no one really gets to go to Spider Cave a whole lot. If there's a 30% chance of rain, there goes your trip. You're not going to go because if it rains, that cave floods. Also, we have a very strange thing in place at this park. We have radon monitoring. Now, radon is everywhere, inside caves, inside basements. We have radon in inner space. However, it was suggested a while back that we should only be in the cave for about 4 hours a day. So generally speaking, if you're doing a tour, you're only doing one of these things, and the rest of your job is the logistical duties, which I'll get to here in just a second. Now, it also, that's kind of a problem with Spider Cave too, because there's far higher levels of radon in Spider Cave, which allows guides, rangers, to only go in there once every 3 months, which isn't nearly enough time to actually train any new rangers or new guides. I've been there like once since I started working there, and that's pretty much the only time I'd be allowed to go. As far as I know, this cave is going to be closed here in about the start of this month, December. Yes, sir.
Do you know why the radiation is so high there?
Personally, I do not.
They found meta-uraninite, uraninite rather. Small deposits, but clearly defined as a yellow mineral.
Very good, very good.
So that
You're teaching me something about the place that I work. I'm happy to
accelerates.
hear.
My Geiger counter went not crazy, but it was elevated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a reason we don't go in there, or at least not very often. Now, if you do want to go to Spider Cave, park rangers like myself can still get a permit. So if you're ever interested in going to the park, maybe going caving, hit me up. I'd love to go caving. I'd love to take you, and let's go have some fun, I suppose. So, one of the hardest parts for me about adapting to life as a park ranger is, one, I had to pick up my life and move to New Mexico. That was kind of hard. But not only that, I'm working in a national park, and within 2 weeks I was already wearing a uniform, which tells the general public, I know everything. I don't know everything, but I'm really trying my best. So the hardest part for me has been keeping track of like the wildlife the plant life, and making sure that I can correctly identify everything. Most people don't ask me questions about the cave. They'll walk around there, ask me, "What's that flower over there? What's that bird making that song?" It has been challenging, and I also have to know about all of the trails and all of the hiking that we have inside of the park. As far as I know, we have the Juniper Trail, we have Yucca Canyon, Slaughter Canyon, Walnut Canyon, we have the Guadalupe Ridge Trail, and those are just the trails that we advertise to the public. There's also the Guano Road that goes from White City to Carlsbad, but that's more of a, you can knock that out in a day. It also takes you past the secondary natural entrance into Carlsbad Caverns. There's also a lot of human history at Carlsbad Caverns, more than 100 years worth of it. Now, if you go to Interspace Caverns, there's one story, and the story goes is the cave was discovered, lots of stuff happened in between, and tours have been given ever since. At this cave, it seems like every year since 1923, something interesting has been happening. We've had all sorts of VIPs like Clark Gable, Amelia Earhart coming to the cave. We've had mineral prospectors that came in 1923 to actually designate the place as a national monument, became a national park in 1930. And ever since then, there's either been studies, research, expeditions going on inside of that cave. It's a lot to keep track of. I'm still trying my best. And like I said, because I wear a uniform, I'm expected to know all of it, which I don't have a problem with that. I just gotta keep learning, right? And then we also have a kind of touchy subject, the native human history. Obviously, there's a lot of human history inside of the cave since about 1898. The Park Service does not exactly like interpreters talking about Native American stories or creation stories. It's not the fact that they say, no, you shouldn't do it. It's we don't always have the express permission to give the stories, particularly in our case, the Mescalero Apaches. We also have a lot of petroglyphs inside of our caves that if you were to take different representatives of the Native American community, each one might say that's one of our petroglyphs. This is what it means. You get 3 different stories, and which one's the truth? Which one do you tell? And there also comes the kind of weird thing that some of these stories are taboo to tell at different times of the year. So generally speaking, actually giving interpretation about the Native Americans is a bit of a gray area. I still think it's important to talk about the people that made this area their home, because they're the ones that helped us find the cave. They're the ones that have the history there. It's still important to give factual, correct information about them and not just make stuff up or say, oh, I heard this, and pass it on in a disrespectful way. And then that's everything above ground. Then you actually get into the cave, and it's a whole different can of worms. Carlsbad Caverns is obviously different than the caves like Natural Bridge and Interspace and everything that we have here, whereas Carlsbad was formed by chemical reactions like sulfuric acid that carved away most of the cave, followed by the more traditional formation of caves that we're aware of. And like I said, everything else is before you even get into the cave. It's a whole different can of worms at that point. Then, if you're not working inside of the cave, if you're not giving a tour, you're usually doing some kind of logistical duties. Those can include, but not limited to, opening and closing the cave, walking in and turning on and off the lights at the beginning of the day, the ending of the day. We have 2 ways into the cave. We have the natural entrance, which is about 1.25 mile walk. We also have the elevator, which is about 1 minute long. Anyone can get into this cave. You can take wheelchairs down into this cave, but you won't be able to take them all the way around. We have a lot of people that might bite off more than they can chew as far as getting into the cave. We have a lot of impromptu medical minor emergencies and sometimes major emergencies. We have people that have had heart attacks. We've had people that have sprained their ankles. It happens. It happens on a daily basis, and this is just part of the job. It's being able to respond correctly, effectively, and efficiently to situations that are happening underground, especially in a place where it's very hard to communicate with the surface via radio or via telephone. Like I said, these things happen all of the time. We have animals that get into the cave. Obviously, we have a colony of Brazilian free-tailed bats, but they can also be called Mexican free-tailed bats, that come into and out of the cave. Not all of them make it out of the cave, and actually right now they've migrated, so we don't really have these issues. However, whenever I first started working, there were a lot of bats on the trail at all times. I personally am not allowed to remove a bat because I haven't had my rabies booster since I started working there. So we have other rangers that have boosters and vaccinations just for getting animals out of the cave. The other things that we have getting into the cave are sometimes rattlesnakes, rock squirrels, and especially ringtails, which can get really deep into the cave. And that kind of goes to waste removal. Animals get into the cave where there's light and they will leave their waste behind. Unfortunately, people do this too, a lot. It is a shame, honestly. I'm not particularly thrilled that that happens. Luckily, I get to run the spill kits in the cave. That's my collateral duty. There's 9 different giant jugs inside of the cave full of everything you would need to respond to cleaning up feces, urine, vomit, tobacco spit, mostly tobacco spit. We have things all throughout the cave that we can use to get this stuff out of the cave and make sure that it doesn't, well, stay inside of the cave. The important part here is that we want to protect, we want to preserve, and I'm happy to have a part in that. I'm happy to keep those spill kits stocked, and I'm happy to respond to anything that is sticky, stinky, or strange. Let's see. A lot of people have told me that Carlsbad Caverns is one of the hardest parks to work at because there's so many moving parts. You have your whole national park underneath you. With the radon, we don't always have eyes on the cave, so we have a lot of people up top. We're keeping track of everyone that's going into the cave, that's going out of the cave. We're pushing people through at closing times. We're making sure people aren't going off trail. But not only that, we're also keeping track of all of our reading material. Last time I counted, we have about 45 different pamphlets that we give out at the park. We have our regular brochures, and we have everything from hiking trails to brochures about other parks and areas, particularly Guadalupe Mountains and White Sands. So that's a lot to keep up with, a lot to restock. We also have a lot of junior rangers. I love junior rangers. They are so cute, and also they get to fill out this little pamphlet, and you get to swear them in and give them a badge. It is a wonderful responsibility. It's probably one of my most favorite parts of the job is getting kids really excited about places like this, and then sending them on their way so that they can continue to do the right thing somewhere else. I really enjoy that personally. We have bat flight programs. I've given a bat flight program before. It wasn't very large though, maybe about 70 people. On our busiest days when we give the bat flight program, we're talking about 1,000 to 1,200 people that we cram into that amphitheater. We even have people that go all the way back to the shade structure before you get into the cave. Let's see, we have astronomy programs where we take telescopes out, we look at the night sky, where there's a lot of wonderful night sky to see out there. If you can get deep into the nature drive or going out to Sitting Bull Falls, you will see more stars than you have ever seen in your life. I do get to get trained on those programs. I get to hang out and look through awesome telescopes to see wonderful stars. I love it. And we have night hikes, areas that are essentially interpretive programs that are going to tell you about the night sky, the night sounds, the animals, the night shift of the Chihuahuan Desert. And there's all sorts of other responsibilities that we have. This just barely scratches the surface. I couldn't even think about everything that I do on a daily basis whenever I was writing this up. So if you do have any questions and you can remind me of what I do, I'd be okay with that. Right. So the perks. I get to go caving kind of a lot. I don't get to go caving as much as when I work at the park as when I used to live in Austin. But in this case, I get to do a lot of quality over quantity. I've been able to go to places that very few people will ever get to go, mostly the general public. I've been able to take the old historic route trail, the original way to get into the cave on the dirt pathways, I've gotten to go into areas where you can see into the main corridor and into the room right next to it. I've gotten to go into areas in Lower Cave that, like I said, very few people get to go to. I've also gotten to go to the Guadalupe room, which is the second largest room in Carlsbad Caverns. It is incredible. And kind of as a rule at the Park Service, I'm not really allowed to use my phone. I don't take a lot of pictures. So this is one of the few pictures that someone took of me whenever I was in the Guadalupe room.
How about Julia?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm working on it. From what I've heard, the people who do work there, the interp rangers, they will at some point get the chance to go to Lechikia. It's definitely helpful to be a caver. Just because I work there doesn't mean that I've been there. I know people in this room, though, that have been there. And I can't wait. I love to go. It would be seriously awesome. We also have a lot of backcountry caves. There's about 8 right now that are open. 5 of them are horizontal caves, 3 are vertical. I have a link inside of my presentation. If you want to come find me after it, I'll show you the link. You can read about it. If you do want to get a permit for a backcountry cave in Carlsbad, do it well in advance. It is otherwise very hard to get a permit like a month in advance. It's also very hard to make any reservations for tours a month in advance, or as people are finding out the day of. Doesn't work. We have a massive resource collection. We have an entire library about everything that has to do with Carlsbad Caverns. I've had the problem of having too much information. I thought I was pretty well studied before I got there. Oh no. We have an entire library full of all of the caving related topics, wildlife inside of caves, cavern formation, hydrogeology, karst hydrogeology, Native Americans, philosophy of the Native Americans, religion of the Native Americans, religions of caves, the sacred darkness, things like that. And that's only one side of this library. The rest of the library is full of historical documents, the superintendent's notes, the surveyor's notes from inside of the cave. We have maps from the 70s, from the 80s. We have maps that are all the way up to today. There's a lot of information. And we also have pretty much every issue of NSS and Texas Speleological Society. Anything that they produce, we likely have. And like I said, there's almost too much information. I figured I'd just start at one end of the library and make my way down. I haven't gotten very far. In addition to that, other things that we do at the park if we're not giving a tour or having some kind of logistical duty is the Park Service covers a lot of our impromptu cave rescue trainings. So far, I've learned how to package patients. I've learned how to put arms in splints. I've learned how to respond to minor medical emergencies. I'm going to take a CPR class whenever I actually get back into the cave. These are things that just happen almost bi-weekly. If at some point I don't have one of those trainings, I start thinking something's a little off. Also, they teach us how to be interpreters, how to talk to people about the caves. I'd say one of the biggest problems at interspace caverns is either the interpreters don't know enough about the cave, or they know too much about the cave, and they have no way to actually tell anyone about it and why they should be interested. We have classes at the park that teach you how to do this, how to talk to people of different cultures, how to make sure you don't offend anybody, but most importantly, how to get your point and your information across. And I might be having a hard time with that tonight because I'm not talking about a cave in front of me. I'm having to talk about what I do. I've also been a part of a couple different mock rescues at the cave. A couple weeks before I left, there was an OCR that was given. I was not a part of that, unfortunately, even though I really tried. Next time, right? And of course, there's the educational opportunities that the Park Service provides. Every single park employee has their their interpretive development plan. And if you want to go out to, say, Western Kentucky University to take karst field studies courses, or if you want to go to NCRC, or do anything that's going to make you a better interpreter, the Park Service will pay for it. The Park Service will send you on your way to go to MPS Fundamentals. If you want to learn, the Park Service is there to help you. And I really do plan on taking advantage of that because I want to be the best at this job that I can be. Anything else would just be a waste of my time and a waste of everyone else's time. This is super important to me. And all I want to do is the best job possible. And the other perk is working at a national park is pretty cool, personally. So, in conclusion, being a park ranger has literally been my life goal since I was a kid. And like I told you earlier, all I want to do is be the best park ranger I can be. I want to make sure that people learn. I want to make sure that people actually care about the places that we have, because otherwise we won't have them. And in a world without that just is really sad. And I don't like to think about it. And the opportunity to educate and serve the public, everyone, whether they look different than me, whether they think differently than me, I don't care. My job is to represent these places for everyone. If I don't do a good job, not everyone gets the experience that they deserve at national parks, national monuments, or World Heritage sites. So even though I'm still figuring my life out, I'm trying my best to do it for a good cause. And I think that's it. Thanks for listening.
It's been a couple of decades since I was surveying in the park. Who's the boss now? I know Ron Curbo's moved on.
Are you talking about the cave specialist, or are you talking about our superintendent?
Either. Or both.
So right now, our cave specialist is Rod Horrocks, and Doug Neighbors is our superintendent.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? I have answers. Over there.
Is there canyoneering in the park too?
There is canyoneering, but mostly you're going to see hiking. I've heard that there's better canyoneering in Guadalupe Mountains and, of course, Zion. Just kidding. Bryce.
Is it true that you can't, or the National Park Service isn't allowed to rescue people out the elevator? I was there one time and an older woman, like, just couldn't walk any further, and they sent an electric wheelchair down, and it ran out of batteries. And she was like right next to the elevator. But like,
Yeah, so it really depends on the situation. Most of the time, if there's some kind of medical emergency, someone's tired, someone's blood sugar is low, someone's having some kind of breathing problems, we're going to do our very best to see if they can self-rescue and get them out of the cave. If that's not an option, like you said, we'll use these massive electric wheelchairs that look like essentially ATVs. Usually, the batteries don't go dead in them. If the person is like incapacitated, they can't move, we'll use that and we'll try to take it out of the cave. The problem with the main corridor, especially for rescues, is there is a staircase right in the middle of it. So you either have to go from up from the bottom, or you have to go from the top. If they're on the top side, they'll go down, pick them up, and they'll head back out of the cave. If they're on the bottom, they'll go through the elevator, grab them, and then go out. It's the same thing for the big room. They'll go in, they'll go out, they'll take the elevator up. If you were to hurt yourself in, say, lower cave, I'm sure most of y'all have been to Carlsbad, right? There's an area where you can look down. It's about 90 feet to the ground. If you were to injure yourself in that part of the cave, they're not going to take you out of the 70 feet of ladders or the hand line. They're going to take you over the jumping off place, through the big room, and then up the elevator. Anyone else have questions?
Can you tell us more about the second? You mentioned the second entrance. Is that the original entrance, or is the normal entrance the original entrance?
As far as we know, the big entrance is the one that Jim White went down. The secondary entrance has been used for guano mining, starting in around 1903, ending in about 1924, I want to say. And actually, guano mining at the park had been carrying on from 1903 till about 1956. There was a borehole at one time that people were lowered down into the cave inside of a guano bucket by Jim White himself. That's since been plugged, and the secondary entrance has been wrapped up essentially with fence and barbed wire. You can get into it, but it's vertical. You don't want to stumble into there. Any other questions?
Do you get permits to go through that?
I'm pretty sure you can. It's not on our backcountry permits, though I imagine if you talk to the Cave Resource Office and you know the right people, you probably could go down there. Kind of a problem with that, though, is that area leads to the back cave. Very, very few people go to the back cave nowadays. There's just no reason to. We interact with the back colony. I imagine if you had a reason to go down there, you could probably go there.
Did the bats still use that entrance?
Sometimes. It smells very strongly of guano and bird poop. And swallows. Over there.
You were mentioning that backcountry permits were difficult to get. I know Liz had done a presentation on it before, and we were just talking earlier, like, we're really interested in going, like, spring.
Yeah.
How difficult is it? Is it more of, like, you just need to
You
get
just
it
need to do it
in advance,
in
or is it a
advance.
huge wait list, or how does it?
You need to do it in advance. Generally speaking, you're only going to get about 2 trips out to those caves a week. And so if you happen to say, I have this date, but someone else has already taken it, you're not going to get the permit. That's what makes it hard, is that it's not like a daily thing. You can't just go out there whenever you want. You have to have the time. And if someone else...
Reserve months in advance, or?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You'd want to contact the Cave Resources Office. You probably mentioned Ellen Trotner. She's a great resource to contact. However, the thing that I posted, or the link that I posted inside my presentation, it has information on how to contact people through normal channels.
Okay, cool.
Last time I was there, they were talking about not having rangers or anybody living up on top in the huts. Is that?
That's absolutely true, save for essential personnel, mostly law enforcement. So whenever you walk down into the cave and you look up, you're going to see these buildings that were put in. The first ones were built by park rangers. The second ones, the ones that look a little bit nicer, were put in by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The problem with those buildings is that they've been there since the 30s, and the piping, the infrastructure that humans would use, it leaks into the cave, or it has been shown to leak into the cave. Also, as you're walking down, you might see what looks like terraces into the cave. Those aren't there to look pretty. That's the old parking lot that used to be directly on top of the cave. So we don't have people parking on top of it anymore, but we do have people that park on the areas less accessed by the cave. We have like a western parking lot. We kind of have a more southern parking lot with the parking in the smack dab center where the elevator goes down. Like I said, the only people that live on park are law enforcement
So
personnel.
you lived in Carlsbad?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
It's a fun little drive.
When cavers do work in there, do they stay in the huts?
Yes, they will stay in there sometimes. I know that we had an intern named Sonia Meyer that was staying at the cave. She stayed on the park. We also do have some cave resource folks like Aria Mildes. She stays on park, but mostly it's going to be your law enforcement. Any other questions? Back there.
I brought some old National Geographic magazines of Carlsbad Caverns,
What year are those from?
1924.
That's the National Geographic expedition. That's whenever they went down into Lower Cave. That is a really cool read.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need to
so-
check that out.
These are to look at.
Yeah, definitely check those out.
They're not for sale. And also 1925 and 1953. These are some early issues, so it's pretty interesting photos. In fact, I think the 53 issue here says something like, so many photographs of Carlsbad Caverns in color. So y'all are welcome to look at these, just don't take them.
If anything I said interests you, go read
By the
those.
way,
Those are
in
great resources.
1953, I made my first caving trip to Carlsbad Caverns with my parents.
Awesome.
And unfortunately, I was 2.5 years old. And I remember it vividly. But partly because we stopped in White City,
Mhm.
which is, and there were, at that time, they had these little roadside zoos that were completely unregulated.
Oh yeah.
And I got bit by a chimpanzee. Who was out of the cage. It's not like I just put my hand
That sounds like what's
So there's a picture of me and my brother on the path, with, going down into the entrance, and I've got this huge white bandage on me. And I got lots of sympathy from the tourists.
I can imagine.
So that was my first experience in Carlsbad.
I'd love to see that picture of you in the bandage so I can actually look at the trails. If you have that.
I had it, and I couldn't find it.
That's okay.
Just tonight. That was something I wanted to bring, but yeah, I can get you a copy of that.
That'd be awesome. That would be great. Thank you. I appreciate it. I had someone raising their hand over here.
Quick question, I've always been curious, what is your regular schedule? How many days a week do you work, and how many hours?
I work 5 days a week. I'm usually at the cave by 7:45. I'll usually leave at 4:15. I am allowed to get overtime, but generally speaking, they want you there when you're supposed to be there, and they want you to leave when you're supposed to leave. So I think I work about 8.5 hours a day. I want to say 5 days a week. I don't get weekends off. My loo days are on Wednesday and Thursday. It's kind of like a stacked loo schedule. Every ranger has a different schedule. There's some rangers that I only see once a week, just because of how the schedule works out. So yeah, 5 days a week, about 8.5 hours a day, 30 minutes unpaid lunch, 2 15-minute breaks, and everything else is either in the cave or getting people into the cave or telling people about the cave.
What's the depth of the lunchroom?
The depth of the lunchroom is 750 feet. You got the lunchroom, right? Kind of like, so you got the visitor center, right? You take the elevator 750 feet down, boom, there's the lunchroom. You go out into the big room, that's roughly 750 feet as well. You actually get to one of the deeper parts of the cave as you're making the hike to the bottom of the main corridor. You get around Green Lake Room. You hike a little ways up to the lunchroom. You get to about 800 or so feet. Lower Cave is actually the deepest commercial tour in America. At about, I'm trying to think. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's like, I think it's 820 feet. It's a little bit lower than the Green Lake Room. And then Lower Cave also connects up to King's Palace, though I haven't personally gone in through that connection. I know other people have. I don't have first-hand experience doing that. Sorry.
With elevators at 750, what's the natural entrance at? How many feet down?
The natural entrance is, I don't exactly know the elevation of the natural entrance. It's so big, it's hard to say, well, here's a starting point. I know that the visitor center is certainly higher than the natural entrance. You hike down about a half a mile. You go up a little ways, and then at that point, you're at the Bat Flight Amphitheater, and it starts diving into the cave. Nothing but switchbacks. Oddly enough, the walk from the visitor center to the natural entrance is a half mile. The trail to go from through the cave back to the elevator is a mile and a quarter. So lots and lots of switchbacks. You feel like you're walking through like endless passage, but it's all just condensed with switchback passage.
What year did they build those?
Oh, that is a doozy of a question. Okay. So the very first trails at Carlsbad Caverns were actually completed in 1932. We're talking about dirt pile trails and wooden stairs. In fact, the first stairs put inside of the cave were donated by the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce in 1925. And they stayed there until they essentially rotted out. And they were replaced with kind of the more modern trails that we have. Real trail renovations began in the 1950s, and over time it was just building on top of those trails. Eventually there was liquid latex, as far as I know, put on top of the trail to make sure that people that did things on the trail didn't actually get into the cave. I kind of think of it like a garden hose. We just walk through it, and we don't interact with the cave unless we're reaching out. But the last bit of the trail, made in 1932, was the connection from the King's Palace to the Papoose Room. Originally, you would have had to go in and around. Now it's just totally straight through in a big loop.
Is there a unavoidable damage that happens regularly because of the tourists? Like just hand oils or something?
So yes, there's, the way I like to think about it is, let's say that we have 20 million people that have been through the cave already, which is a low estimate. I'm terrible at math, so let's say that 1 out of every 5 people touch the cave. That's still 1 million people doing that, right? So yes, we absolutely have damage that is avoidable, but it happens. It really does happen a lot. Actually, the King's Palace tour used to be part of the self-guided route until it was realized that instances of damage were happening in the numbers of thousands. So they eventually closed that area off to make it only a ranger-guided tour. If you walk through Carlsbad Caverns with your zebra light and you look around, you're going to see little dots of paint, like blue, red, neon green. Those are damage inventories that have been done over the years. So yes, it happens frequently. Not only that, but there's always volunteer opportunities to go to Carlsbad to pick up lint out of the cave.
The lint pickers.
Yes, lint. A lot of people would say, "Why are the formations so dark?" Well, it's in an inaccessible place for us at the time, and it's covered in lint, like 100 years worth of it. So,
Is there a plan for the lint picking program now that the other folks are done? Is it going to be restored or
are you talking like cave restoration or restoring the lint picking program?
restoring the lint picking program?
As far as I know, it actually happens pretty regularly. People are going down in small teams and taking care of it. If you want to volunteer at Carlsbad Caverns, you should contact a lady named Joanne Garcia. She's the volunteer coordinator. If you want to go work for the park, if you want to go clean lint, maybe cover up cables, you're more than welcome to. Just give the volunteer coordinator a call or an email, and you can spend your time in Carlsbad Caverns too. Anyone else?
So last time I was there, there were some issues with the elevator.
Yeah.
Still, and it's still.
No, right now we're operating on 2 elevators. It's elevators 3 and 4. Whenever you walk into the elevator orientation room, you walk in, there's 2 elevators on your right, and there's 2 elevators on your left. The 2 elevators on your left are not for human use. We only use those to take things, food, drinks, into and out of the cave. Exactly. And the other one is for the people. As far as I know, the elevators are working right now, but of course there's always something interesting happening. I saw a little kid walk off the elevator the other day with this terrified look. I was like, that's weird. And they said, well, the elevator didn't open. I'm like, oh, that explains it. Which can be kind of scary if you're 750 feet above the ground and you're just hanging out. But rest assured, should the elevator break down and you're in there, there's water, there's blankets, there's convenience bags for the restroom. You don't want to use those. You don't want to use those. I found out the hard way, you should never use a convenience bag. Don't do it. Bottles only. Any more questions, or have I bored y'all to death?
When the government unfortunately shuts down, are there any operations that go on?
At Carlsbad Caverns, no. The only people that are there is law enforcement officials. That's it. Mostly, whenever the last time it did happen, we had plenty of people try to get into the cave, and plenty of them failed. That's not to say, though, that people have tried in the past and died. Alcohol is always a factor. Don't drink in cave. Or better yet, don't drink and try to break into Carlsbad Caverns. Bad news.
Is that the biggest elevator in the world?
For a long time, whenever it was first installed in 1931, it was one of the largest single-shaft elevators in the world. It's not now, but I don't remember what beats it at this point. Back there?
I just wanted to thank you for speaking so loudly and clearly. I can actually hear you at the back of the
Me Yes, sir.
Is there still survey going on?
Yes. There is. There was a team of female park rangers a while back that were working on pushing what's thought to be the newest, deepest section of cave. It's not yet. They're all teeny tiny female park rangers, and that's the most recent survey I know of right now. I know that there's active survey work going on in the Guadalupe room as well with Derek Crystal. If y'all don't have any more questions, I think I'm done. If you want to come talk to me, I'll be somewhere.